I've talked a lot on here about my experience working various jobs. I worked as an engineer for a few years, and before that, I worked in fast food for years. Then, most recently, I worked at a car wash for, I don't know, like 1 month maybe. But one thing that always remained a constant for me, no matter which job I was at, I was always very quiet. I always kept to myself, mostly just because I am a very socially anxious person. I've been this way my whole life. So anywhere I go, I always end up having a reputation as being the quiet guy. I'm that weird guy that never talks to anyone, the guy that nobody really knows very well. Usually, when people would try to talk to me, I can never bring myself to say much. I just give these short responses, straight to the point. A lot of times I'll just nod and smile in response to anything someone says, as long as it's not a question they were asking. Because honestly, I've always been afraid to let people know anything about me. I'm afraid to show my personality. Because I think most people would think I'm weird if they knew about me. My interests and my hobbies and everything, I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable sharing. So I just keep to myself. But there has been a handful of times over the years when I did try opening up a bit, and every single time I get punished for it. I always end up having it confirmed that, yeah, I shouldn't talk to my coworkers. I mean, one time I was telling someone a story, and then another coworker literally yelled across the room for me to shut up. That's the kind of thing that happens anytime I try to open up. I'll talk more about that specific interaction here in a minute, but first, I want to tell y'all about the time I decided to try to share one of my creative interests with a couple of my coworkers, and I'm pretty sure I ended up ruining my reputation with at least a few coworkers as a result. This was at my engineering job after I had already been working there for about 3 years. So by this point, I already had the reputation of being the quiet guy that hardly ever talks. But I think up till that point, I wasn't necessarily seen as the weird quiet guy, but that was about to change. By the way, I don't know if it's like this for y'all, but for me, it's like once my reputation as the quiet guy is already established in a given social circle, whether that's at school or at a job or a certain class in college, whatever it is, once I know I have that reputation, it's extra hard for me to ever speak up because then I feel like I'm going against people's expectations. So people will automatically be like hyper aware of everything I'm saying. It's like they'll be listening too closely. So at that point, once my shy guy reputation is already established, it's just nearly impossible to ever break out of my shell. So, in this particular instance, the reason I think I felt more comfortable sharing a bit about myself and my personal interests, it was because one of the two guys I was talking to was new, so he probably didn't know how chronically shy I was. And the other guy was a guy that I had already gone on a couple work trips with. He seemed to be pretty friendly for the most part, and he was about my age, so of all the people I worked with, he was probably one that I felt most comfortable around. So basically, what happened was me and these two sales guys went together to, well, I don't want to reveal too much about what the job actually was, so I'll just say we went out into the field. Okay, so we were all in the car together. They're sitting up front, I was in back, and they were talking the whole time, pretty much. And since the one guy was new to the job, I think this was his first or second week on the job. So since he was new, a lot of the conversation was focused on getting to know him better. As in, my one coworker was asking the new guy all these questions about his background and his hobbies and everything. But he was also sharing some things about himself, as you would when you're trying to get to know someone. So, since I was there too, both of them were also involving me in the conversation, even though, like usual, I wasn't saying a whole lot. I remember one thing they talked about they were talking about what was their favorite albums of all time. And they asked me, which I've talked about this on here before, but that genre of question, what's your favorite whatever, that is so hard for me to answer. I don't really have a single favorite of anything. So it just feels wrong somehow. Like I'm being dishonest if I answer a question like that with one single album. I just feel like say I answer that question and I say, I don't know, let's say that I say, Is This It by The Strokes is my favorite album. Well, then I'm worried that whoever I said that to will forever think I'm like a diehard Strokes fan. And I think the Strokes are the best thing to ever happen to music when really, I do like that album a lot, but there's probably 50 other albums by different artists that I think are just as good. Obviously, I'm overthinking things, but that doesn't make me any less anxious about answering those kind of questions in the moment. So I actually just told them something like, it's hard to pick just one. Then the one guy was like, well, just say an album you like. So I'm actually proud of myself for this because I actually managed to answer the question like a regular person for once. I'm pretty sure I said Ziggy Stardust by David Bowie. And the new guy was all like, oh, yeah, that is a great album. So just overall, I think I was performing better than usual for me in this conversation. So I was feeling more at ease than usual. So then at some point, they're talking about hobbies. So after they both got done sharing a hobby they enjoy, they asked me what's my main hobby. So at that point in my life, I was really getting into programming. Specifically, I was trying to be an indie game developer. I never made anything you could call a full game, but I had participated in a few game jams, which, if you don't know what a game jam is, it's basically just a short competition where you get anywhere from 24 hours to maybe up to a month in some cases to create a game. So when this conversation was taking place, it was only a week or two before that that I had made a game for Ludum Dare, which is a very well-known game jam in the indie game dev scene. Actually, a lot of indie games that ended up being really popular actually started as small prototypes that were originally made for Ludum Dare. Hollow Knight, for example, I'm pretty sure that was originally made for Ludum Dare. But anyway, so I had just recently participated in this Ludum Dare game jam where I made a very primitive first-person shooter, kind of a Doom clone, I guess, except very, very primitive. Like, there really wasn't much to it at all, and the graphics looked like complete shit. But I was proud of myself. It was probably the most significant programming project I had completed up to that point. This was before I got a master's degree in computer science, by the way. So my coworkers asked me about my hobbies. So I said, I'm learning programming. So they're like, oh, cool. Then one of them asked me if I've made any apps or anything. So this is where usually I would just say no, because I usually do not want to share any details about my personal life. But on this occasion, I was just feeling more open than usual, so I decided to share a little bit. So I told them I was into making video games, and they both seemed to think that was really interesting. So they kept asking more questions, and I kept answering. So eventually, I had told them all about Ludum Dare and the shitty first person shooter I had made. So then the new guy was like, that's really cool. And then he's asking me if he could download the game anywhere. So I had already removed the game for download right after the competition ended. So I told him, you can't download it, but I can send you a video of it. So he was like, yeah, cool, send it to me. Then my other coworker asked me to send it to him too. All right, so we'll come back to that later. I did send them the video later after I got home, which turned out to be a horrible idea. But this particular conversation that was going uncharacteristically well for me, where I was finally opening up to some coworkers, that conversation itself took a turn for the worse. somehow they got onto the topic of Bitcoin, and both of these guys were big time haters of Bitcoin, which is fine. At the time, I was really getting into crypto because this was back in a time when Bitcoin was just starting to really take off. I want to say it was worth somewhere in the 20,000s for a single Bitcoin at that time. But, anyways, they started talking about Bitcoin and they asked me if I had any Bitcoin, which I did. So I said, yeah. Then immediately it started to feel like they were talking down to me. They both kept saying things like, you know, it's not going to last, right? You better sell it all before it crashes, blah, blah, blah. They just didn't believe in it, which is fine. But they were acting like I'm a total dumbass or something for buying into it. But I remember the new guy said something like, the problem with Bitcoin is it has no intrinsic value, which I still think that's a ridiculous statement. But yeah, I responded like, fiat doesn't have intrinsic value either. To which he responded, yeah, well, that's where we disagree. And that's all he said, which, by the way, I just looked it up just now, and everything I can find online says that no, fiat money does not have intrinsic value. So I don't know what this guy thinks intrinsic value even is. I mean, I guess if the power grid fails in the dead of winter, you could burn paper money for warmth. So I guess there's a bit of intrinsic value there. But yeah, the guy just didn't know what he's talking about. So then my other coworker says, I just don't trust Bitcoin because it's not backed by anything. It's all digital. There's nothing physical backing it. So maybe I was getting a bit excited in my tone of voice, but I really don't think I was being rude at all. But what he said was very stupid, so I responded like, fiat isn't backed by anything either, and most US money is just as digital as Bitcoin. It's just numbers on a screen in some bank's database somewhere. So I said something like that, then he didn't respond. The other guy didn't say anything. It was just radio silence after that for the next few minutes until one of their phones rang and he answered it. And that was the end of all the getting to know each other chat, which, fair enough, the conversation had run its course, but I still cringe thinking about this because it was going so well at first. I was finally actually sharing something about myself with these guys, telling them about my love for programming and game development, which at the time I would say I was passionate about it. So it was kind of nice to share that with someone in real life and have them react as if they found it interesting. I kind of felt like we were bonding a little bit. But then after the whole Bitcoin thing, it just felt really tense. Like the way that neither of them responded after I corrected them, which, maybe I should have just not said anything. Nobody likes to be corrected. I get that, but I didn't feel like I was being a jerk or anything. I thought we were having an interesting discussion where, sure, we disagreed about it, but it wasn't a big deal or anything. I don't know. Maybe I'm just socially retarded. But yeah, it was pretty awkward and tense after that, riding in the car, but I didn't really think too much of it. Well, then the night after I got back home, I sent both of those guys the link to the video I made of my game. It was just a little video I had made where I showcased all the important features of the game, which, remember, they both asked me to send them this video. So that's why I sent it to them. Well, neither of them ever responded after I sent the video. They never replied to the text where I sent it, and they also never said anything about it in person. Which, that would be bad enough. For me, as socially anxious as I am, I opened up and shared a creative interest I have with these guys. So for them to not even respond, it's not a good feeling. But if you remember earlier, I said that I'm pretty sure sending this video actually ruined my reputation with at least a few of my coworkers. So not just with these two guys. So here's why I think that. A week or two after I sent them the video, I ran into this one guy in the bathroom. He was at the urinal next to me, and this guy would usually try to make small talk anytime I ran into him in the bathroom. He was just one of those guys, but he looked over at me and he just says the title of the game I made. But he said it in a weird kind of way, like, say, if the game was called Demon Killer, that's not what it was called, but let's pretend it was for the sake of the video. So this guy looks at me and he's like, Demon Killer, huh? So I was surprised, of course, because I never said anything to this guy about my game. So I was like, what? And he goes, Demon Killer. Yeah, I saw the little game you made and I don't like it. So I was just like, oh, okay. Then he goes, you need to find God. So I was just confused. I didn't know what to say. I thought he was joking at first because he was the type of guy that joked around a lot. So I actually forced a fake smile when he said that because I thought he was joking. But then he was like, he's looking at me with this dead serious look and he goes, it's not a joke. You need to find God. So I was a little bit confused about the whole interaction. I don't think the game was particularly controversial in any way. So I was just confused. And of course, it was also a bit confusing that it's like, I didn't tell this guy anything about the game, but, I realized obviously one of my other coworkers that I sent the video to, they must have shown him and possibly some other people, who knows, they must have shown him the video. But anyways, later that day when I was leaving for the day, that guy from the bathroom was talking to another coworker, this middle-aged lady that I had never really talked to before other than when we were introduced sometime after I first started there. But he's standing there kind of leaning against this lady's cubicle wall, and as I'm walking by, he sees me coming from a bit of a distance, and he's just like, well, if it isn't Mr. Demon Killer himself. And then him and the lady were both staring at me the whole time as I walked by, because I had to walk by them to exit the building. So, I don't know. If you were there, I promise you could tell the guy wasn't trying to be funny. He seemed like he was offended. I don't even know if the lady knew what the fuck he was talking about when he did the whole, oh, if it isn't Mr. Demon Killer. I don't know if she had seen the video or if this guy or one of the other guys had told her about it. I don't know. But she was also looking at me as if I offended her. That's how it looked to me. Maybe I'm misjudging it, but I'm pretty sure they were both offended by, I guess it was some of the imagery in the game. Because it was meant to have a sort of Doom vibe. The whole point of the game is you're trying to kill as many demons as possible, which I didn't think would be particularly controversial. The only thing I can think that was probably where they got offended, there was one enemy skin that had a 666 on its forehead because, it's meant to be a demon. And there was a pentagram on the wall in one part of the game, which, that was just the narrative of the game. I was basically trying to make something along the lines of Doom. But also, I would never have shown this to either of those people. I wouldn't have shown this to any of my boomer coworkers. The two guys I did share it with, they were both about my age, and I figured they probably had some familiarity with either Doom or Diablo or Quake, one of these popular games that has that sort of dark, demonic aesthetic. So, I don't know. The whole thing was weird. Nobody ever mentioned it again, by the way. So the grand result of me having opened up and shared something that I had made with some of my coworkers, the result was nobody ever said anything positive or encouraging about it. Nobody even said anything neutral about it. I did get negative feedback in the form of, you need to find God, and an intense stare down by two boomer office workers. And who knows how many other people in the office saw the video, but, they just didn't say anything. It's embarrassing, honestly, because that's exactly what I was always afraid would happen. That I would be misunderstood or people would think I'm weird. That's exactly what happened. And that was exactly my fear of what would happen. So, yeah, after that, I never opened up again. I think that was the first and last time I ever told someone about something creative I had made. It was basically the worst possible reaction you could get. Okay, then the other thing that happened that I mentioned in the intro. So, one time I was in the lunchroom at work having lunch, and this one guy started asking me about what I was eating because he said it smelled good. I'm pretty sure it was just chicken and vegetables I had roasted. It wasn't anything special, but he was asking me how I made it. So I was telling him exactly how I cooked it and what all spices I used and everything. And I was definitely talking a lot more than normal because I think just because it was something that was easy to talk about. I was just describing a process I've gone through probably 100 times before, and it was a direct answer to the question he had asked me. So, yeah, it was just easy to give that response in that situation because there was no chance that I misinterpreted the question or anything like that. I was just directly answering his question. I wasn't revealing anything about my personality, if that makes sense. So it just didn't engage my anxiety like it would have if I had been asked a more open ended question. So I was just describing how I made my chicken. Then this other coworker shouts over from across the room. He says, "Hey, loser maxing, stop talking so much." Then, of course, everybody was looking at me. Like, soon as he said that, the whole room went silent and everybody was looking right at me. And I could tell from the start, it didn't seem like he was actually trying to be a jerk. He thought it would be funny because everyone knew me as the guy that never talks, so he had probably never seen me talking so much, so he just thought it would be funny to call attention to it, I guess. Which still is a dick move, for sure. It's inconsiderate, if nothing else. But yeah, I'm just saying, I could see what he was going for, so I really don't think he meant anything by it. Because also, this guy was always really friendly every other time I interacted with him. But yeah, then after a couple seconds, he just goes, "Okay, carry on now." And he kind of chuckled. I didn't say anything through all this, by the way. I was just completely caught off guard. Pretty sure my face probably went completely red because I just can't help it whenever I have all the attention on me like that. I blush really easily. But, regardless of whether or not he intended it to just be a lighthearted kind of joke, it doesn't really matter. It was still very inconsiderate. Anyone should be able to realize that's not the sort of joke that I would enjoy. Obviously, the joke is at my expense. I get that it's not a huge deal. Ultimately, I don't think he meant anything by it, but just the fact that, going back to what I said about having the reputation as the quiet guy, because I had that reputation, this is the kind of thing that happens. It's extra noticeable whenever, if ever, I do actually speak up because when I do, it's like this rare event has taken place. So it just piques everybody's interest. They're like, "Oh, the guy that never talks is finally talking." Like, so everybody's paying attention. So knowing that and having that confirmed in moments like this, that's the kind of shit that makes me never want to go out in public again. It sucks. Let me know if you can relate. And if you can, please consider watching some of my other videos. There's also some secret videos you can watch for free on my Patreon, videos YouTube doesn't want you to see, so check that out. There's no sign up required, you can just watch the videos. Thank you for watching this one, and I'll see you next time.